Greetings from the StarCraft 2 Community Balance Council. After around 7 months since the last patch, we are happy to present the next major multiplayer balance update, featuring changes for 14 units and 10 buildings, as well as 2 new abilities. We feel that the previous 5.0.13 patch has mostly achieved its goals, fixing community pain points around Widowmines and Cyclone, and slightly helping Protoss players in early and mid-game against Terrans. However, the current patch has a couple of more ambitious goals outlined below. The first goal is to nerf defensive and camping playstyles for all races, both related to early and late game on the higher levels of play. We will target specific units, buildings and abilities suited for camping to promote more active gameplay across all stages of the game. The second goal is to continue reshaping Protoss tools for high-level gameplay. We believe there is still a major gap between how Protoss race plays and feels on the highest level of play and the levels below. The current set of changes aims to make Protoss race slightly more efficient with the strongest and smartest execution, while helping Terran and Zerg players against Protoss on the lower levels. The third goal would be to provide strong playstyle alternatives for various matchups. Zergs might be now better equipped to use ground-based armies against mass air strategies, and some of the Terran mech units are now more efficient in harassment or certain straight-up scenarios. Lastly, we would like to continue adding overall gameplay and quality of life improvements viable across all levels of play. We would like to thank everyone for providing your feedback for all previous community patches, and we hope that the set of changes below will also be actively discussed and tested on the PTR server to help us evaluate their influence. I am sure that this patch is going to be actively discussed. Whether it's also going to be tested on the PTR server, we'll have to wait and see. For now, let's go over the changes. I'll give you my opinion and my general thoughts on the patch as a whole, as well as on individual changes. Starting with Protoss changes. The Nexus. Shield Battery Overcharge ability has been removed, with a new ability added, the Energy Overcharge. Energy Overcharge costs 50 energy and recharges 100 energy of the targeted allied unit or structure with a maximum range of 8. Developer comment. While being one of the most important tools in Protoss defenses, Shield Battery Overcharge is also one of the most frustrating abilities to play against, and it's overall more efficient at the lower level of play, unlike other defensive techniques like Transfuse or Mass Repair. Instead of this ability, there is a new tool which can help empower Protoss support units like Sentry, Oracle or High Templar during defense. The ability can still be used to restore shield battery energy, but it is expected to perform much weaker in this scenario than Shield Battery Overcharge. I have played a bunch of games with this particular tool, and I thought initially that it was going to be way too weak as a replacement for Battery Overcharge. Right now, I am not entirely sure. There's a lot of scenarios in which a single sentry having 150 energy at spawning is absolutely huge, also against Terran. The use of defensive hallucination, the use of scouting hallucination, the use of guardian shield, or of multiple force fields actually negates a lot of the things that Terrans can do. I believe that there are going to be some builds, mainly involving tanks and stimmed units, and here I'm thinking of like a factory 3-rex type of play. I think these types of builds are going to be difficult to hold without battery overcharge, or at least significantly more difficult to hold. A lot of other builds, and I've tested a bit against Cyclone builds, one base, Marine Tank, Liberator stuff. All of these kind of seem fine. Regular 3-rex without tanks, a single sentry can hold that easily with 3 force fields now. I think these are going to be less of an issue than I would have initially imagined. Overall, I think this should still be considered a nerf, while also allowing for some different aggressive options. Think of overcharging sentries with an immortal push. Defensively though, at the lower levels, it's going to be much harder to execute things because you'll need to actually use units rather than just clicking the battery, overcharging, and then holding whatever push is coming by fighting in the battery overcharge. So yeah, basically a higher skill ceiling on this, more allowed creativity, and I think a nerf in versus tank scenarios is what I think and what I've kind of experienced so far. Now to buff the battery a little bit, the shield and HP has been increased from 150 to 200. And developer comment here is, considering this ability swap might be a direct Protoss nerf in a lot of early and mid-game scenarios, shield batteries will now have increased survivability to slightly compensate for that. And the PTR gains will be closely monitored to see if any additional buffs are required in this area. I think that is very important. I think the moment it is obvious that Terrans are just going to bust through a Protoss defense with 2 base tank all-ins, 1 base type of tank all-ins as well, there's always the possibility, I think, I'm not sure if it could, I mean, you can always just revert whatever, but also just other buffs added in. So that's something to keep in mind. PTR is, of course, a test patch still, so things can still change. Here, I like the overall direction that is being taken. Like, you remove something that is relatively low skill to execute in the battery overcharge, and you replace it with something that has a much higher skill ceiling. I don't think the numbers for the battery and the energy overcharge are entirely correct at this moment, though. I think the direction is good, but I think that the actual balance implementation is not ideal yet. And I think something probably still needs to change there to make that viable. Up next, the Colossus. Shield and HP change from 150 and 200 to 120, 250. So Colossus are going to be better with armor upgrades, and they're going to be better against EMP pushes. That is really all there is to it, because no battery overcharge, having more shields is no longer crucial for key Protoss units like Colossus. This is just true. This is a very, very minor buff. I almost wouldn't want to call it a buff, because I think that is insulting to the word buff. The Tempest. Supply cost decreased from 5 to 4. Damage point decreased from, well, by 28% reduction, which makes it easier to micro. You can see the damage point kind of as an attack delay before you can give any more micro inputs. And then the attack range versus air has been decreased from 14 to 13. Overall, this is a buff to the unit, making it easier to implement it into your kind of late mid-game army. It's going to be nice against lurkers. It's going to be nice to have against liberators of Terran as well. A little bit lower supply is just helpful, a little bit more microable, and a little bit worse in the very late game scenarios with high Tempest counts, cannon setups, where that range versus air is more important. Okay, up to the Immortal. So this, I think, would be considered a buff on the Tempest, most definitely. The Immortal. Mineral cost decreased from 275 to 250. Weapon cooldown increased from 104 to 114, which is a 9.6% increase. Now, the word increase might be confusing some of you. This is a nerf. Weapon cooldown gets increased. That means it is slower to attack. The mineral cost decrease does very little here. Kind of throw it in the mix to pretend, that it is not that bad. This is bad for the Immortal. It is just a major decrease in damage output on this unit. The unit felt very strong, specifically against Zerg, so I understand it, but this is just a major nerf to a key Protoss unit. And that's how it should be read as well. Disruptor. Purification Nova radius increased from 1.375 to 1.5, but the Purification Nova damage decreased from 145 and plus 55 versus shields to 100 and plus 100 versus shields. So it remains the same damage output versus Protoss in PvP, but it becomes worse against units like Marauders, Roaches, and Ravagers, while being more effective against Marines, Ghosts, Banelings, and Hydras. If you hit a Marauder post-stim, a Marauder is going to keep 5 HP if it gets hit by a Disruptor shot. This is in order to, at the highest level right now, I think it's very difficult to hit Disruptor shots, period. And I'm not talking about getting a juicy hit. I mean, just getting anything whatsoever. It is very difficult against the highest level Terrans, like the top 5 Terrans, to get anything, like a Marauder, a Marine, a Ghost, literally anything. This is to kind of help Protoss at the absolute highest level, while making it a bit easier for lower level Terrans to keep their army alive. They don't pay attention for a couple of seconds. They don't just see all of their Marauders explode. I think this is a good direction for the Disruptor to take. I think having something that is so lethal in a moment of not paying attention, I think is bad. I do wonder if these numbers are correct or if something else needs to happen with the Disruptor, because not one-shotting Marauders is a Disruptor that is so expensive at 150, still really worth 4 supply at this point. Should the cooldown of the Purification Nova really be this long? So I like the direction, but I think these numbers don't feel correct to me yet. And when I played it, I played a couple of games with it. It does feel like I hit a little bit more, at least 1 or 2 units every single time, rather than nothing a lot of the time. When I did hit a big Marauder, block, and it didn't kill them, that felt very frustrating. Against Zerg at the high level, this is completely irrelevant because Disruptors are not really built at the high level against Zerg. Storm and Immortals just reign supreme at, I don't know, like top 50 in the world. You don't really see dedicated Disruptor players. At least I haven't seen it in a long time. Most people just accept that Storm and Immortal is simply better. Specifically, Storm is just so freaking good. No reason to get Disruptors. So yeah, I think for higher levels, this could be a bit of a buff if something else changes. Right now, I would classify this as just an overall nerf, really, for the Disruptor. But I like the direction that this is going. Mothership. Mineral, gas, and supply cost increased from 306 supply to 408 supply. Shield and HP increased from 250 to 350, and the damage increased from 6 damage for 6 beams to 6 damage to 4 beams and 4 maximum number of targets. So it can now attack up to 4 targets at the same time. Developer comment here is, while we are happy with the previous set of changes which brought Mothership back to Protoss versus Terran late game and improved its efficiency in other matchups, we also appreciate the community feedback about this unit losing an important part of its identity. This set of changes brings back full Mothership power with its widely known 400 cost, while also adding a unique ability to target up to 4 units at the same time. The single target DPS of the Mothership is now reduced, but the overall damage output will be much higher. I don't care too much about this change, to be honest. It's nice to see that the Mothership, which is considered a hero unit, is finally capable of killing something. So I think this is a good change, but calling this like a major buff, I think would be disingenuous as well. Like this is kind of like the Colossus thing, It's like, I guess it is slightly better. This is not going to win a whole lot of games. It's going to make the Mothership a little bit cooler. And I think that is a fair goal to have as well. So not upset about it. Those are the Protoss changes. Quick summary of the Protoss changes is basically directionally good things, in my opinion. Energy overcharge, I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of the direction of the Disruptor as well. But I think balance-wise, potentially problematic, specifically against Terran. I'm really viewing most of the problems for Protoss at the moment through a lens of Protoss versus Terran in general, which I think is the most problematic matchup for Protoss. I don't really view PvZ as an issue at all. I don't think a lot of high-level players view PvZ as an issue whatsoever. I think most Protosses actually think it's TOS favored, but I could be wrong about that. I don't want to speak for all TOSses here. All right, moving on with the Terran changes. Bunker, missile turret, sensor tower, salvage ability added for missile turret and sensor tower, also returning 75% of their cost, and the salvage process is now being cancelled upon taking damage. This change will allow Terrans to be more efficient while moving from one defensive point to another, while at the same time increasing their overall investment in early game attacks featuring bunkers, as the salvage is now much easier to counter. I'm a big fan of the salvage process now being cancelled upon taking damage, mainly from a lore perspective as well, People often don't think about the lore enough, but as you all know, I'm a huge lore fanatic. And it doesn't make any sense that if you're busy salvaging a building and trying to take some of the materials back, if you're being shot at by a stalker, that you can do this in a safe manner. This would never be, accepted by any type of HR. So just from the lore perspective, I think that's a brilliant change. It's going to make Reaper rushes a little bit less good, which I think are very powerful already. So I'm a fan of it. And it just kind of makes sense. The salvage ability added for missile turret and sensor towers, I think this is mainly focused at making some of the early game safety defenses a little bit easier to return. So 3-4 turrets to deal with a DT drop, sensor towers maybe to deal with a 3-gate or 4-gate blink push, and then getting some of that money back. I personally don't see a lot of Terrans who are going to be pushing their lines of turrets very far forward. This is maybe going to happen with 4 or 5 turrets in a game. I don't think it is super useful. I don't think it's going to be a massive issue either, to be honest. Most of the time, the battle lines of Terran are kind of drawn fairly early on, and they kind of stay up. I'm curious if we're going to see a whole lot of salvaging on turrets and sensor towers much later into the game. I think it might save the Terran, in an ultra late game, 500, 600, 700 resources overall or so, which I don't think is super impactful. But I'd be happy to be proven wrong here as well. Planetary Fortress armor decrease from 3 to 2. I personally would have preferred seeing the armor upgrade for buildings being removed. I think conceptually that's bad if you want less turtling to then give buildings extra armor later on in the game. I think one of the really cool things in StarCraft 2 is when people defend run-bys or attacks and drops with other units rather than with static defense, because then there is some type of skill expression there. Whenever you see someone dropping into cannons or dropping into turrets, I don't think that's actually very fun. I like it when people have to respond to someone else doing something actively with their units. And I think it feels like buildings are very often a crutch. I think it's good to have a couple, for minor harassment, but I think the Planetary Fortress, in my opinion, is just too strong for what it is. It is really bulky. You can't really harass it at all. And even with bigger armies, if you have a small defensive army next to the planetary, I think it's too powerful, personally. But at least it is some type of a decrease. I don't think it's enough. I think the armor, the building armor, should just be removed, personally. That's what I think. Sensor tower, mineral and gas cost decreased from 125/100 to 150, so much cheaper, making it easier to build against Phoenix harass, against Mutalisk harass, against 4 or 3 gate blink, and then you can salvage it back, of course. But the radar range has been decreased from 27 to 22. That is a 34% area size reduction. I think this is absolutely the correct way to go. I think the sensor tower has been one of the most mind-boggling buildings in the game. This should have never made it through in Wings of Liberty. This shouldn't have survived the beta of Wings of Liberty. This shouldn't have survived the real game of Wings of Liberty. It should have been taken out in Heart of the Swarm, then in Legacy of the Void again. Any major patch that let this go through has failed because of this. I think the sensor tower is insane. One of the main parts of StarCraft 2 is having map control and creating vision. Having a building that does that for you, and then in combination with scan, being capable of exactly seeing what is there, is absolutely bonkers to me. It is insane. I think it's good. It's a good start. I think this building should be shot out of the game, and we give Terrans something different, I think the sensor is a ridiculous concept to me. It is. I hate this building. I think this is the building I hate the most, and I really hate the planetary as well. So I must really hate the sensor tower too, is what you can gather from there. But at least it's a good start. Good direction. Haven't gone far enough with it yet. It should be shot off the map, let me tell you. I don't even want to read the developer comment. That's how upset I am. Orbital Command. Extra supplies call down now also increases the HP of supply depot to 500, immediately repairing it. And there's a little moving image. Actually, it's a GIF. Or a GIF, or a diff. It is a moving image that is looped, all right? This looping image over here shows you how it works. So basically, if you're under attack, you can drop the extra supply, and it's gonna bring the HP up to 500 and instantly repairs it as well. I think this is fun. This is a mechanic that is extremely underused, the extra supply. Out of the 3 things that the Orbital Command can do, this is the one that is the least utilized. And in complete isolation, I think this is a brilliant change. You have something that's underutilized, you give it a little bit more use and see if people use it more. I think that's great. If you use it to defend an attack, it has an upside in that it heals your building. It also has a downside that if you lose that depot, you're now double supply blocked, which I think is fantastic. I love this change in isolation, Keep that in mind, okay? For the big summary later on. All right. Hellion. Blue Flame upgrade bonus damage versus light increased from +5 to +9. As the Blue Flame upgrade is rarely utilized as a harassment tool, this change is added to allow Hellions with Blue Flame to two-shot workers of all races. This might also help underused mech playstyles in all matchups and promote generally more active early and mid-game from the Terran players. If there's one thing I don't want to do in life is helping underused mech playstyles. I hate mech playstyles. I hate the overused ones. I hate the underused ones. I hate all of them equally. I really dislike mech. It almost never provides fun games. I don't think this is going to have an impact on TVP. If it does have an impact on TVP, I'm going to be very sad because I hate mech. If it has an impact on TVC, because we're going to see more mech as a result, I will dislike this change because I don't like mech. I'm personally biased against mech and mech players. I hate them personally as well. Yeah, I do actually. And I don't like them. I hate them. So not a fan of this change. I don't think it's going to be very impactful though. That is my gut feeling. This will not apply to Hellbats, just to Hellions. Up next, the Liberator. Advanced ballistics effect change from providing +2 range in Defender mode to increasing the radius in Defender mode from 5 to 6.25. This is a very large area increase. The circle looks freakishly large. I've played 3-4 games against this now. And what do I have to say about it? I have no clue if it's better or worse. What are the upsides of this? The upsides from the Protoss perspective is that they can't put these Liberators in unattackable locations as your 5th, 6th, 7th base, whatever it is. You can always kill it with Stalkers, which is phenomenal. Thank God. Finally, I don't have to build a Stargate and a Void Ray or a Stargate and a Phoenix to deal with a freaking 3-supply unit just destroying my mineral line in the late game. I don't have to spend like 5 minutes figuring out how to beat that one unit. That is a ridiculous interaction, and I'm glad that's gone. However, the circle is really big. It's huge. When I played the games, it felt worse, but I could be wrong about that. It could be that the player I was playing against wasn't good at microing the new Liberators, and there are different ways of microing them. For now, though, as a Protoss, I was kind of happy playing against this. It was fine, in my opinion. But then again, I could be wrong. I just haven't played enough against this. The second thing, the smart circles, now also affecting Liberators, I'm not a fan of. This basically means that they're gonna siege and unsiege faster. And I am not a fan of siege units moving into their special mode quicker. I think that should be a little bit of a lengthy process. I didn't like it with the Widowmine when it goes in fast up and down. I don't like it when the Lurkers do it fast up and down. I didn't like when you could lift the siege tanks into medevacs and drop them while sieged. I think it's cool that a siege unit needs to, it has an animation that takes a while. And then once it's in position, it's powerful and strong and it's difficult to break. I think that's cool. That's my opinion on this. But I'm not entirely sure strength-wise. I think I'm happy that long range is gone. I hate stuff with very long range. It feels silly. But I'm not sure about these numbers. It's my general feel. 4. Explosive payload, the splash mode damage is increased from 6 and +6 versus light to 8 and +4 versus light. Explosive payload splash radius is increased from 0.5 with 100% splash damage to 0.5 with 100 damage, 0.75 with 75 damage, blah, 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 blah. It's basically a pretty freaking big damage buff to the Thor explosive payload, except the range has been decreased from 10 to 7. Developer comment here, Thor's explosive payload mode, while being default for the unit, is rarely utilized outside of TVZ against Mutalisk and is overall much weaker than its high-impact counterpart. This experimental set of changes is aimed to test a very different approach for the explosive payload, allowing Thor to deal much more damage to all types of units in a cost of a major attack range reduction. It is basically something different. I don't think... I played one game where someone built some Thors against me, but he didn't use this mode, so I haven't been capable of testing this yet. I think this is going to be bigger against Zerg, where if the Thors are perfectly in position, it's probably easier to defend, but it's probably easier to maneuver around them now with the Mutas, which is kind of cool, I think. I'd really need to see this in play for me to make a proper judgment in that matchup. Now we go to the Zerg changes. Mineral cost increased from 150 to 175. This is for the Queen, by the way. The hatchery has a mineral cost decreased from 300 to 275. So let's talk about these two. Queen's going to be a little bit more expensive. That's going to be offset by the hatchery being a little bit cheaper. So this allows for probe blocks to be more consistently stopped, getting your hatchery down with a 15 hatch build order. So before the first Overlord that you build, you can go 15 hatch. You can pretty consistently get it down on most maps with this change. The Queen is more expensive. That means that... let's actually talk numbers here for once, because too often people are vague. I think here also it says, the developer comment says, Zerg playstyles against Terran and Protoss players on higher level are mainly focused on defensive gameplay featuring mass queens. What does mass queen actually mean? Against Protoss, most of the time we see 6 or 7 queen openers, okay? With a 6 queen opener, with these new changes, Zerg is going to pay 75 minerals more. That's it. That's what we're seeing. With a 7 queen opener, they're going to be paying 100 minerals more. You'll get 25 of those minerals back once you get, you know, a 4th hatchery, and then 25 more you get back if you get a 5th hatchery, but maybe you also need to rebuild some queens. So sniping queens is going to be, 1, more impactful, they're going to be harder to replace, and getting extra queens to be extra safe is going to hurt you a little bit more as a Zerg player. On top of that, Spinecrawler has been buffed, faster to build, a little bit stronger against non-armored units, and the Sporecrawler also gets buffed while getting the HP decreased. So basically moving away from defending mainly with queens, a little bit more with spores, a little bit more with spines is the goal over here. I think these are positive changes. I wouldn't have minded seeing some stat nerfs on the queen. So in my mind, the queen really should be more of a supporting unit of other stuff. I wouldn't have minded seeing a stronger spore with even lower HP and a weaker queen. I think that would have been ideal. That might have been an issue against Terran though, like Reaper Heli and stuff. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of seeing like 10 queens going into the mid game. I'm not a huge fan of seeing 7, 8 queens going into the mid game either. I'm just not a huge fan of that personally. But maybe that's just me. Overall, I think these changes are fine. Some people might be worried about proxy hatch builds. I've watched a couple of games against proxy hatch. I've played against a couple of proxy hatches myself. It honestly seems fine. Like, they're better, obviously, proxy hatch builds now with Spinecrawler rushes, but it seemed fine to defend, at least as a Protoss. Maybe in ZVZ it's going to be very difficult. I don't know. I don't play that matchup. All right, moving on to the Hydralisk. Move speed on creep with muscular augments. Upgrade decreased from 5.1 to 4.83. So a little bit of a speed nerf. New ability added, the dash. The dash is researched in the Hydralisk Den, requires Hive. The upgrade costs 100 minerals and 100 gas and takes 64 seconds. Dash is a non-active targeted ability with 10 seconds cooldown. Upon its use, Hydralisk receives 60% move speed bonus for, well, almost a second. And here is a looped moving image, a little video film that we can watch again and again and again. Look at that. Hydra's going back and forth. It's really a minimal boost just to get out of mainly Storm. Once again, Purification Nova is not really a thing at the high level, at least. Maybe at lower levels. Purification Novas are very common against Hydras, but at high level, most of the time it's just going to be Storm, Immortals, some charge slots against Zerg. So, yeah, new ability. I personally think it's cool. Yeah, I like new abilities. I don't think it's going to be broken. I don't think it's going to be insane. I just think it's cool to have. Moving on to the Infestor. Microbial Shroud is now sticking to units, providing them with its effect for 3.6 seconds, while of the Shroud, despite being very strong on paper, Microbial Shroud is not widely used in Zerg versus Protoss late game. I'd like to say something about that. I think Microbial Shroud is going to be used more now, not even necessarily because of the effect of the buff, but just because of the fact that it has gotten buffed. I think Microbial Shroud was already quite strong, specifically against Liberators, and I was always shocked that we didn't see this to bust Liberator positions more frequently in the ZVT matchup. It's kind of, Microbial Shroud is almost like the Raven of Zerg, you know? Everyone but Terrans knows that Ravens are good in the late game, and everyone but Zergs know that Microbial Shroud is good in certain niche situations. I wonder if this is going to significantly change Zerg versus Protoss. One could imagine maybe Hydra, Lurker, Infestor, Viper as some type of composition against even more committed Airtos armies. We'll have to see. I'm not sure if this is enough, to be honest, because Storm is still very, very powerful as a tool against Hydras. All right, moving on. The Ultralisk. While moving, the Ultralisk is now able to push allied units. We feel that the previous Ultralisk size, attack and cost changes were all helpful to improve the state of the unit, but this additional change should help Zerg players across all levels to better utilize Ultralisk strength, avoiding cases where Ultralisks were stuck behind other allied units. I have no real opinion on this. The Ultra is not really a unit I struggle with in any matchup, even from the Terran perspective. I don't care so much. Maybe at very lower level, this makes things too easy. I think one of the skills that Zerg has is kind of getting the right units to the front, and that now kind of gets undone by having them automatically kind of push their boys aside. I don't know. I just don't care so much about this change, to be honest. It's not for me or my level. Then the Broodlord. This is the change where I think the direction is absolutely wrong, and I think the numbers are in the right direction, but also wrong. Hear me out on this. I think the Broodlord, the Carrier, and the Battlecruiser are the 3 worst units that exist in StarCraft 2. This is my personal opinion. I've been very vocal about this in the past. I think the Carrier is probably the worst out of all of them currently. I think the Broodlord was worse in the past. I think the Battlecruiser is consistently a terrible unit. They tend to create non-dynamic, stale, bland games where everything revolves around a single fight where most of the time there's very little micro involved. In the times of Broodlord Infestor, that was terrible. In the times of Mass Carrier in PvZ, that was absolutely terrible. Mass Battlecruiser is always awful at lower levels. I think it is... I've watched so many lower level players die to Mass Battlecruiser, and it's just not fun. I just don't think it's fun, personally. So I hate these units with a passion. That's why I believe that any type of buff to these units is always bad as a direction to take for the game. I just don't like these units, so I think any Broodlord buff sucks. Having said that, I think the Broodlord, if we look through the lens of balance, is way too weak. The Broodlord is a tier 3, difficult to get to unit that has as one task is to kill ground stuff. However, it can't kill a Stalker in even supply. If you have even supply Broodlords fighting with Stalkers right now, the Broodlords will lose if you target fire properly with the Stalkers and you blink properly. That should not be the case. It really shouldn't be. So I understand these changes, why they're being done, probably mainly for ZVT, but also a little bit for ZVP, in which the late game, in my opinion, and many other Toss's opinion, is a little bit Zerg favored. But I hate the thought of buffing the Broodlord. I don't want to give the Broodlord anything. I want to take away everything from the Broodlord, just make it a different unit. I think any mental energy that is being used on buffing the current Broodlord is mental energy wasted, because I hate it so much. But that is just personal hate. You know, I don't expect all of you to hate as much as I do. It's not healthy. My doctor tells me all the time, Kevin, you gotta stop hating the Broodlord. Stop sending me emails about the Carrier. Like, this is very inappropriate, Kevin. I'm sorry, I just hate these. I can't help it. Then there's a bunch of other stuff. The one cool one that I really liked is Command Center, Nexus, and Hatchery now auto rally to mineral fields. If you've ever tried bringing a new person into StarCraft, you know that this is a very big thing. No one new really gets this. And everyone that has played for a long time is not going to care. I think these are really good changes to have. Like, just really quality of life changes like this, I think are brilliant. And I love them. And there's a couple more. So yeah, cool. That's the entire patch. Those are my thoughts. To bring it back, overall summary, what do I think of the current patch? If it were to be implemented today, I think that PvT would be more favored for Terran than it is currently at almost all levels, except maybe the very top. Okay? Except I think there it would be close. It's hard for me to judge because I don't quite know the impact of the energy overcharge for high-level build orders. It is hard for me to say. But That is my general thought. I also feel like that I think CVT is probably going in Terran's direction here. So I think Terran's just getting buffs overall in the way it's currently set. I do believe that the direction of a lot of the changes is correct. I just think some of the numbers are not correct. There is going to be a window over the next month or so in which we can test all of these things. I'm going to be testing a lot on my stream. I'm going to be exclusively playing the new patch, or on the PTR server, the public test realm as it's called. You can do the same thing. And we need to figure stuff out. That's just how the process is right now. Something gets released from the Balance Council, then we test it, we give feedback, and then we hope we can influence changes into things that we like. If it's implemented like this, I think TOS is going to have a pretty rough time, in my opinion. And I think Zerg as well. 2 more things, actually, that I do want to mention. I forgot. Thing number 1 is the Ghost. No change on the Ghost, I think, is a mistake. I think the Ghost is balance-wise too strong. And from a game design point, is a ridiculous unit right now. There's way too much power there. It does everything well. Outcomes in PVZ or TVZ are often binary, with the Ghost getting a snipe off or not getting a snipe off, and then completely snowballing the fight one direction or the other. I think it's just not good. It's not very fun to watch. It doesn't create a lot of fun scenarios. The interaction with EMP is also not fun. I wish EMP was more like how Storm works, where you cast it on the ground, and then if you stand in it, it removes your shields. I think that would be much cooler, in my opinion, forcing the Protoss to split a little bit against it or move away after an EMP gets cast. Is there anything else that I would like to see? Oh yeah, the second thing, 1-gate expand. The one thing that the battery overcharge removal does, also, I forgot to mention it earlier, so I'll mention it now, is that 1-gate expand in PvP will be much harder to execute or even impossible to execute. I think this is an extremely positive change. People at a lower level might not understand this, but at the highest level of PvP right now, 1-gate expand is running rampant. And there is a serious problem with 1-gate expand, is that if 2 people play 1-gate expand, so 1-gate expand versus 1-gate expand, it often devolves into a Phoenix mirror, which is probably the worst thing to watch and one of the worst things to play. If you play 1-gate expand versus 2-gate expand, the 2-gate expand player, if the 2-gate player goes for an expand build, he's going to be behind economically. 1-gate is just better, simply, by quite a bit. It's like a significant difference, very far behind for the 2-gate player. If the 2-gate player decides to all in, the 1-gate player needs to defend. So basically, the game is you're behind, or you all in, and then you win or you lose, which I think is bad. 1-gate versus 1-gate is very awful to watch. And it sucks that over the past 3 years, whenever we have the 2 best Protoss players play against each other, we get god-awful games. I want to watch MaxPax versus Hero and be genuinely excited to watch it. I have not been excited to watch a PvP with MaxPax in it for a very long time. It is just completely uninteresting to me. And I think that is extremely bad. So that is another kind of a point for the energy recharge rather than the battery overcharge. That I think 1-gate expand is absolutely cancerous, and I hate it. Just like I hate the Brood Lord. Don't forget that, Brood. I hate you more. And I hate the sensor tower. All right. That will be it. I'll be playing a lot of games over the next few weeks. I think I'll be updating as well. Maybe I'll make another one of these videos. Maybe you guys can flame me a little bit. And then I talk to you guys, and we're all friends again. Look. We're in this together, all right? Play the public test realm, send replays, give me feedback, and hopefully we can fix it all together. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.